So Blake Lively just pulled off what her team is calling a massive legal win. And I have to tell you, the more I actually read through what the judge wrote, the more this looks less like a victory lap and more like someone declaring they won the race after their car exploded at the starting line. Blake Lively technically got something, sure, but calling this a win is genuinely like throwing a parade because you found $1 in the ashes of your burned down house. Let me walk you through what actually happened, because the headlines are making this sound like Blake Lively just crushed it in court, and that is not what went down at all. What actually happened is that Blake Lively spent months and months hyping up this massive payday she was about to receive, talking about triple damages and punitive awards and attorney fees that would make your eyes water. And then the judge issued his ruling and basically said she gets a fraction of her legal bills back and absolutely nothing else. No triple damages, no punitive damages. No hundreds of millions of dollars, just a coupon toward her attorney fees, and even that coupon is way smaller than her team wants you to believe. So let me set the stage here, because this whole saga has been going on for what feels like forever. Blake Lively starred in It Ends With Us, the adaptation of Colleen Hoover's book about domestic violence. Justin Baldoni directed the film and also played her abusive husband on screen. Behind the scenes, things between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni completely fell apart. Like, spectacularly. There were power struggles, accusations of sexual harassment. The whole thing was an absolute disaster. Then on December 20th, 2024, Blake Lively went very public with accusations that Justin Baldoni and his studio, Wayfarer Studios, had sexually harassed her on set. She also claimed that Baldoni and his team ran a digital smear campaign to retaliate against her and silence her for making complaints. On the last day of 2024, Blake Lively officially sued Justin Baldoni and his team in federal court for sexual harassment, retaliation, and a bunch of other claims. Justin Baldoni fired back with his own lawsuit for defamation, false light, civil extortion, you name it. Now here is where things start getting interesting, because on June 9th, 2025, the judge dismissed Justin Baldoni's case against Blake Lively on a motion to dismiss. Then many months later, on April 2nd, 2026, the judge absolutely gutted Blake Lively's case on summary judgment. He threw out 10 of her 13 claims, which meant dismissing every single individual defendant, including all the claims that actually had any spice or drama to them. Not long after that, with just 2 weeks left before trial was scheduled to start, the two sides decided to settle the rest of Blake Lively's claims. And here is the part that really matters. At the time, nobody could see the terms of the actual settlement agreement, but according to reports, no money exchanged hands through this agreement, $0. But the settlement did carve out one issue that both sides agreed to keep fighting over, and that issue was Blake Lively's pending motion under California Civil Code Section 47.1. Section 47.1 is a newer California law that protects people who speak up about sexual harassment, especially when they become defendants in defamation cases. The law says that a good faith communication about harassment made without malice is privileged. Blake Lively wanted this protection so badly, and I mean so badly because if she is declared a prevailing defendant under this law, she gets 3 enormous things. First, her attorney fees and costs get covered. Second, she gets treble damages, which means 3 times her actual harm. And third, punitive damages on top of that, which is money designed purely to punish the plaintiff for even filing the lawsuit in the first place. Blake Lively's own lawyer was out there doing interviews, hyping up the incredible strength of this law and the incredible strength of her case, talking about how the California legislature felt this was really important legislation to pass, and how the court would likely hold hearings on damages and award triple damages and punitive damages and attorney fees. Her legal team was basically promising a massive payday at Justin Baldoni's expense. And what kind of numbers were they actually talking about? Well, Blake Lively claims she lost a staggering $161 million because of Justin Baldoni's alleged smear campaign. That number included $56 million in past and future earnings, $49 million from her hair care line, and $22 million from her drink company. She even claimed that the mean girl and bully labels alone cost her over $40 million in reputational harm. Which, side note, maybe that is just a good reason to refrain from making yourself appear like a mean girl or a bully when you are being filmed talking about things or doing things. I am just saying. But anyway, looking at this $161 million figure, I am not even sure that would have been claimable under section 47.1. If she was saying she sustained those losses during the alleged smear campaign that came way before Justin Baldoni's defamation lawsuit, there is a bit of a causation problem there. But the way her lawyer was talking, it sounds like that is basically the figure they were going for. Under section 47.1, she wanted to triple a number like that and then add punitive damages on top, which could hypothetically double or triple that number again. Her legal team was out there doing interviews and promising a massive payday at Justin Baldoni's expense. Blake Lively's lawyer was also talking about how this lawsuit is about so much more than money, how Blake has been so brave in this moment to stand up and fight back not only for herself but for other women she observed in that workplace who were being sexually harassed, how she has forged this path ahead and is leaning into this law, which is such an important law for all people who are victimized in the workplace in this way, how she will be one of the first to have this law litigated in court in New York, and how you are going to see great things from her in the future in this space of trying to build these types of laws in other jurisdictions. She had to weather a significant battle, a horrific digital retaliation campaign, and because of that, she has brought a lot of light and accountability to this space. I always try to refrain from saying things like, oh, she is another Amber Heard, or oh, that person is another Amber Heard, because each of these cases is unique. But that answer just sounds so much like what Amber Heard was trying to do when she falsely accused Johnny Depp of abuse, and I just cannot help but point that out. Now look, advocating on behalf of sexual harassment victims and survivors is not a bad thing. There are a lot of people out there who need advocacy for these kinds of problems. But there is a difference between, on the one hand, just diving in and doing the work and actually helping the cause, and then on the other hand, just walking around talking about how much you would love to be known as a leader on the topic. In the real world, true leadership roles that actually end up making a difference are usually earned, not given. In order to be a leader, you need people that are willing to follow you. And personally, in my opinion, I do not think that Blake Lively has really earned it, but that is just me. Anyway, so everyone was waiting on Judge Lyman's final ruling on the section 47.1 motion to see how this last battle would end. And then on June 12th, 2026, the judge dropped his order, and wow, this was not the result you would expect after listening to all that bluster from Blake Lively's team. The judge basically split his order into two parts. One part was Blake Lively's request for attorney fees, and the other part was her request for punitive and treble damages. Let me start with the fees because this is where people are getting confused. The court has to ask two questions here. Question one is she even entitled to attorney fees under section 47.1? And question two is, does a court actually have a way to award them? On question one, the answer was yes, she is entitled to attorney fees. Here is why. To get the privilege, Blake Lively just had to show that her statements were about the harassment she experienced. The Justin Baldoni side did not even dispute that her statements were about exactly that kind of thing. That was kind of what the whole defamation argument was all about. So because she made that showing, the court said the burden then flipped over to Justin Baldoni, and to beat the privilege, he had to show that she acted with malice. According to the court, making a statement with malice would mean the statement was made with ill will or without a reasonable basis to believe in its truth. But the thing is, while Justin Baldoni and the others alleged malice, Judge Lyman said that was not enough. They had to actually prove it with evidence to meet their burden. And that is an insanely hard thing to do on a motion to dismiss before the case has entered into discovery and the two sides are exchanging evidence. This is one of the reasons why this new law is so powerful for people who find themselves as defendants to these kinds of defamation cases. So Blake Lively clears that bar and she is the prevailing defendant entitled to the fees. Then comes question two, the mechanism. Basically, the judge needed to find a legal vehicle to actually award those fees to Blake Lively. Since this is all in federal court, Judge Lyman is bound by the federal rules of civil procedure. And within those rules, he found his vehicle in Rule 54D, which is literally titled Costs and Attorney's Fees. It basically outlines how a party can get attorney's fees when it has been determined they are entitled to them. So while the judge awarded these fees to Blake Lively, he did not decide how much money Justin Baldoni actually owes her. Instead, he set that aside for another round of briefing because that is expected to be its own can of worms. Blake Lively now has to produce her receipts and argue that her fees were reasonable. But here is the part I think a lot of people miss in this discussion. She does not get all of her fees back. She only gets the reasonable fees tied to defending against Justin Baldoni's defamation claim. Hold on to that because we are going to talk about it more later. Now, when it comes to what the court said about Blake Lively's damages claims, I personally think that Justin Baldoni kind of lucked out here. The judge actually suggested Blake Lively probably is entitled to treble and punitive damages since she is technically the prevailing party, and the statute lists those damages as something the prevailing party can get. But, and this is absolutely enormous, he said there's simply no proper mechanism for him to award those damages, at least not with what was in front of him. Section 47.1 itself does not lay out any procedure for awarding the damages it says a prevailing party is entitled to. And the federal rules of civil procedure, as far as Judge Lyman could see from the arguments in front of him, do not give him one either. Blake Lively wanted to use the same rule she used for the attorney fees, Rule 54D, to grab her damages. But the court shut that down pretty hard. He said the case law is clear that damages are not the same thing as attorney's fees. Rule 54D is a super narrow rule intended just for costs and fees. The judge said there is just tons of case law talking about how damages are not the same thing as costs and fees, like attorney fees. He explained that the normal way to get damages is through full litigation where a case is actually decided on its merits, meaning going through the whole process of discovery all the way through trial, or at the very least a decision through summary judgment. And that just never happened here. Justin Baldoni's case died on a motion to dismiss before any evidence was exchanged through the discovery process and way before trial. So there was no merits determination to base a damages award on, which means Blake Lively was essentially trying to create a backdoor to the entire litigation process to get her damages. The court also hinted that forcing damages through this backdoor might even violate Justin Baldoni's 7th Amendment right to a jury trial. Now, Judge Lyman did not say the damages were impossible in federal court or even under the federal rules of civil procedure. Instead, he suggested Blake Lively could have gotten them by filing her own claims or counterclaims against Justin Baldoni for something like malicious prosecution or abusive process. And based on how Judge Lyman wrote this order, anyone reading it would likely think that at least in theory, Blake Lively could still file those kinds of claims now. Some of the reporting seemed to pick up on that too. But here's some nuance that seems to be completely missing in Blake Lively's specific situation. That door is basically nailed shut. Let me walk you through exactly why. As to Blake Lively's treble and punitive damages, Judge Lyman basically said no. Now, normally, a party that loses something where the stakes are this high, I mean hundreds of millions of dollars worth, would just appeal it, right? But in this particular case, Blake Lively actually cannot do that. And it is because of a little document she signed about a month earlier. This is where that settlement agreement from May 7th, 2026 comes back in. And in my opinion, it comes back to haunt her. Let me just say before getting into the details of the settlement agreement that it is insanely rare that the public gets any kind of glance at the actual text of a settlement agreement. But this agreement was just made totally public in recent weeks. Having drafted and reviewed a ton of these as a litigator, I was personally shocked there was no confidentiality clause in it. Looking back, I do not think I have honestly ever seen one or handled one that did not have it. That missing clause is really the only reason we are able to read this thing in the first place. It sounds like this was probably pushed by the Justin Baldoni side, given that his attorney, Brian Friedman, said in an interview that the transparency of what was in this agreement was so important to them. The agreement says that Blake Lively did not release her Section 47.1 claims, rights and remedies tied to her pending motion, and it specifically pointed to the motion in front of Judge Lyman, so nobody could confuse it with some other hidden motion somewhere on some other docket. But here is the thing, that same agreement also said that Both parties waived any and all rights to appeal or challenge whatever Judge Lyman decided on that motion. And to be clear, the language on that was broad. It covered any appeal of or challenge to the disposition of the motion, whether by Judge Lyman or otherwise. In plain English, that means once he decides it, that is it. No takebacks, no crying about the result. You take it on the chin and move on. So that means no chance to appeal this result in any form. So then someone might ask, but what about Judge Lyman's hint about filing a malicious prosecution or abusive process claim? Could Blake Lively just file a new lawsuit and start over now? Well, the way I am reading this agreement, that is also a pretty hard no. In the settlement agreement, Blake Lively also expressly waived any and all claims, damages, and rights that she had in any way related to her employment, the movie, or the consolidated action. This settlement agreement defines the consolidated action as essentially the umbrella term for both her and Justin Baldoni's lawsuits. That means she cannot file any new lawsuits for any claim she had coming out of this whole saga that is in any way related to her lawsuit or his lawsuit. And the thing about the malicious prosecution and abusive process claims is that Judge Lyman said she could have brought them way back at the start of the case. By the time she signed the settlement agreement, those claims already existed among a bunch of others she could have otherwise brought. That essentially means they got swept up in everything she just waived. They are part of that group of claims she has now said she is never going to be allowed to bring in the future. But what if someone argues that maybe Blake Lively did not know she had those claims at the time she signed the settlement agreement? After all, Judge Lyman only just now mentioned these claims in this order as something that could drive her Section 47.1 damages. The problem there is that even if she did not know about those claims, the settlement agreement also says the parties waived these claims whether they are aware of them or not. In other words, I did not know I could bring this as no excuse. She still waived them. So here is another argument Blake Lively could hypothetically try to make in favor of filing further claims. What if she argues they are actually not even new claims at all? What if she says she is actually still continuing her Section 47.1 motion pursuit of damages, which she expressly kept in this agreement? Well, the way I read this, that would just land her right back at the beginning where we talked about her waiver to appeal or challenge the disposition of the motion. Remember, that motion did get its final resolution on June 12th. 2026, if she were to frame a new lawsuit for malicious prosecution and abusive process as a continuation of that motion, that is a challenge to Judge Lyman's disposition, which is something she agreed not to do. Either way, she is actually kind of screwed. If she calls them new claims, those were waived as part of the consolidated action. If she calls it a continuation of her Section 47.1 motion, that would be considered a forbidden challenge to the ruling. I do not see any other possible justifications for Blake Lively trying to further pursue any claims for damages. Unless there is some crazy detail I am missing here, this appears to be checkmate. Game over. All of her battleships are officially sunk. Now, if you followed this whole saga for a while, you will hear me echo what I said back when these two first signed the settlement agreement in May. Back then, we could not even see the terms, but I still called this a huge sign of failure for Blake Lively. I said Blake Lively really needed to win in 3 arenas. Those are the litigation arena, the business arena, and the court of public opinion. And she struck out in all 3. Her case got gutted. Her businesses took major hits. She got rebranded as a mean girl in a way that has really stuck. Arguably, this whole litigation saga has actually just solidified that in the court of public opinion. My thoughts on that still have not changed now that we have a decision on the Section 47.1 motion. She really needed a lot in order to win this whole thing, and she did not get anywhere near it. Now, granted, Judge Lyman did award Blake Lively her attorney fees under Section 47.1, and we still do not know the exact number, so it is not exactly like Justin Baldoni won in this thing either. He still has something to pay out of pocket, whether that is out of his own pocket or out of his insurance company's pocket. But remember, Blake Lively only gets to claim reasonable attorney fees that she paid in order to defend against Justin Baldoni's defamation lawsuit. And that defamation case was dismissed on June 9th, 2025, over a year ago. Although we do not know exact numbers, we can make some estimations by looking at the docket. If you do, you will notice the order dismissing his case was document number 296. But by the time reports of a collective $60 million in legal fees hit the public, way more litigation had already happened between the two sides that was outside of Justin Baldoni's defamation case. In fact, the litigation arguably exploded after Justin Baldoni's case was dismissed. Just to illustrate it, the parties filed their joint notice of settlement on May 7, 2026. On the docket, that filing was document number 1434. So between Justin Baldoni's dismissal and that settlement notice, more than 1,100 documents have been filed. Every single one of these documents has to be analyzed, researched, written, reviewed by whichever side is actually filing it. Then the other side has to read it, analyze it, review it, maybe do research, maybe talk about it, maybe strategize it. All of these things, that gap of 1,100 documents means everything up to Justin Baldoni's dismissal is a maximum of 20% of the filings leading up to the settlement. And not even all of those 296 documents were about his lawsuit. A ton of them had to do with Blake Lively's case against him. So her recoverable slice under section 47.1, the work defending his defamation claim, is in reality going to be way, way less than 20%. It shrinks even more when you remember that discovery is where the real money gets burned in litigation. Almost all, if not all of that discovery spending went toward her case that she was pushing against him. And none of that is claimable under section 47.1. Realistically, whatever Blake Lively gets back here is going to be nowhere near what she spent overall. The way I am looking at all of this could end up being maybe 5% of her total legal fees, max. And here is another thing to remember about all of this. Nothing in this whole saga was ever actually proven on either side. Justin Baldoni never proved defamation and Blake Lively never proved harassment. Both sides just fell short. So calling her the prevailing party is, yeah, it is technically true, but it is really only because he failed to prove his claims, not because she actually proved hers. So sure, this fee award makes a nice headline, but at the end of the day, it is really nothing more than a Pyrrhic victory. This tiny speck of fees cost her tens of millions of dollars in other legal bills, plus massive damage to her public image and her businesses. You get the picture, and in my personal opinion, this was all self-inflicted. Blake Lively could have taken a totally different road and gotten a very different result in all of these various arenas, but by trying to destroy Justin Baldoni, I think she ended up destroying herself. Blake Lively walked into this fight promising to be a leader, promising to be a champion for victims, promising to emerge with hundreds of millions of dollars and a completely vindicated reputation. What she actually walked away with is a legal bill that makes your stomach turn. Businesses that took serious hits, a public image that now carries a permanent mean girl asterisk, and a judge telling her that sure, she can get some of her lawyer fees back, but only the ones tied to defending a case that got dismissed over a year ago, and only a fraction of even those. Blake Lively's big win is that she gets to dig through her receipts and beg for a partial refund, while the actual damages she spent years hyping up remain completely out of reach. That is not a victory. That is watching someone celebrate because they found a bandage while they are still bleeding. Before we wrap up, if you have been enjoying this breakdown and want more deep dives into celebrity legal drama, make sure to subscribe to our channel Pretty Loud. We are always breaking down the cases everyone is talking about. So what do you think? Does this all make sense to you? Do you think there is in fact some clever path left for Blake Lively to still squeeze damages out of Justin Baldoni? Or has she truly painted herself into a corner here? Tell me if you think I missed something. Because from where I am standing, Blake Lively bet everything on being the hero of this story, and the judge just handed her a participation trophy and told her to go home.